Well, we've talked about the general formula for dysfunction. We now want to focus on specific dysfunctions and how to respond to them. In the toolbox section, you will find details for how to handle 13 common dysfunctions. For each dysfunction, you will find a description, common causes of the dysfunction, ways to prevent it, what to do in the moment should it occur, and what to do after the moment. Through your Masterful Meetings portal, you have instant access to the information. So if you are ever in a meeting and the dysfunction appears, you can look it up and address it immediately. In your toolbox, you will also find sample video scenarios for each of the dysfunction. For brevity in this module, we will cover the 4 dysfunctions that appear here with an asterisk. 3 are among the most common dysfunctions, the dropout, the naysayer, and the whisperer. The 4th is one of the more dramatic ones, the door slammer. The sample videos all use a similar scenario, a team that has come together to develop recommendations for improving the organization's process for hiring people. Let's start first with the dropout by showing you how not to do it, and then let's look at how to handle the dropout masterfully.
Okay, we've just completed our introductions, and what I'd like to do next is move into defining the steps in the current hiring process. And the reason that's important is before we delve into the problems and the solutions, let's make sure we have a common understanding about how the system works today. Does that work for everybody? Yeah. So think about the last time you hired someone. Think about all the steps you had to go through, all the people who got involved, all the processes that we went through. What are some of the steps in how the process works today?
Usually somewhere early on, we place an ad.
Place an ad in the paper. Got it. Where else?
Well, before we place the ad, we first identify the need to hire someone, and then we get HR to help us develop the job description and the ad.
I got it. Sounds like 2 steps. Identify the need, and what was the second one, Elle?
Get HR to help us develop the job description and the ad.
Are there any other steps?
Yeah, well, at the same time we place the ad, we usually post the job internally.
Well, do we usually do that at the same time, or do we usually post it internally?
Well, we usually do it at the same time, but we fill most of our positions internally, so it may be a waste of money to do that.
Ah, that's an interesting point. It sounds like a problem, so can we put that on the issues list? How would you like me to write that, April, so we don't lose it?
Yeah, absolutely. You can just put that we fill internally.
Fill internally. Got it. So when we come to problems, I want to make sure we don't forget it. We can address it at that time. Does that work?
Yep.
Sure, that's
Great.
fine.
Let's get back to steps in the current hiring process. What other steps might we have?
Yes, we review the resumes and decide on the finalists.
Review the resumes and then
Decide on the finalists.
decide on the finalists. Anything else?
Once we decide on the finalists, we interview the finalists and go through reference checks, and if all goes well, then
Interview the finalists and then give me the other one?
go through reference checks.
Reference checks. Got it. Are there any other steps that we're missing?
That's pretty much it.
Good, good. Can we move on?
As you probably noted, only 3 people participated in this discussion. The others were completely checked out. So how do you handle a dropout? A dropout is a person who does not participate in the discussion. Common causes of a person dropping out include the person has an introverted communication style. The person is usually talkative but is quiet due to work pressures or other outside factors. The person is dissatisfied with the process or the content. So to prevent dropouts, you can establish a ground rule such as everyone speaks. In the moment, however, there are a couple of strategies in particular. One strategy is to say, let's hear from everyone on this next point. With this question, I'd like to start with and give the name of a person who's 2 seats to the right of the dropout, and then go around the room to her left. The question is, see, by starting 2 people before the dropout, it doesn't look like you're picking on the person, and the person can see it coming and prepare an answer. After the moment, you'll want to discuss the issue privately with the person to ensure that there's not an additional problem. So let's try this same scenario again, showing how this situation would be handled masterfully.
Okay, we've just completed our introductions, and what I'd like to do next is move into defining the steps in the current hiring process. And the reason that's important is before we delve into the problems and the solutions, let's make sure we have a common understanding about how the system works today. Does that work for everybody? So think about the last time you hired someone. Think about all the steps you had to go through, all the people who got involved, all the processes that we went through. What are some of the steps in how the process works today?
Somewhere early in the process, we place an ad in the newspaper.
You know what? Just to make sure we can get everybody involved, what I'd like to try is a round robin. So let me start with L, and then I'd like to do work clockwise so everybody has a chance to indicate a step in the current hiring process. And please, when it's your turn, if you don't have something to add, please feel free to say I passed that round. L, you want to get me started, please?
Sure. Well, before we place an ad, we first identify the need to hire someone, and then we get HR's help to develop the job description and the ad.
So HR helped to develop
The job description?
job description. Got it. What else?
At the same time, when we place the ad, we post the ad internally, which gives a chance to our own employees to apply for the position.
All right. Are there any other steps, folks?
That's pretty much it.
Great. So it sounds like we've got all the steps, yes?
Yeah.
Head nods. Good.
So next, let's turn our attention to the naysayer. A naysayer is a person who frequently makes negative statements such as, "that won't work," without offering solutions. Common causes behind the naysayer include the person has a communication style that focuses on identifying problems and risks. The person opposes the idea suggested and is identifying reasons for the opposition. The person opposes the idea suggested and is attempting to create stumbling blocks to prevent adoption. So again, let's look first at how not to handle the naysayer.
Okay, folks, we've been going for a couple of hours right now, and it looks like we've got a solution that everybody's in agreement with. So what I'd like to do to make sure we've got consensus is do a quick round robin. I'll start at Rodney. We'll go clockwise. Let me know if you feel good about this so we can move on. Rodney, you good?
Sounds good.
Gotcha. Dana?
I'm good.
L?
No, it won't work.
What do you mean it won't work?
I meant what I said. It won't work.
Man, I've got everybody around the room feeling like this is going to work. What's going on?
I don't care what they feel. I'm saying that it will not work.
Well, look at the room. We've got marketing, we got sales, we got ops saying thumbs up. We've even got HR board on it.
Are you deaf? I'm saying that it won't work.
Naysayers are excellent at saying, "no, it won't work." Unfortunately, we tend to play into their hands by trying to convince them that it will work. Don't do it. Let's try this again, but this time with a masterful approach.
Okay, folks, we've been going for a couple of hours right now, and it looks like we've got a solution that everybody's in agreement with. So what I'd like to do to make sure we've got consensus is do a quick round robin. I'll start at Rodney. We'll go clockwise. Let me know if you feel good about this so we can move on. Rodney, you good?
Sounds good.
Gotcha. Dana?
I'm good.
L?
No, it won't work.
L, you may be right. How would you fix it? What would you do to make it better?
See, naysayers are great at throwing rocks at the house. They are great at telling you what is wrong with something. The key to dealing with naysayers is to put them in the house. Don't ask them what is wrong with it. Instead, ask them, how do we fix it? Your goal is to help them to transfer their energy from focusing on the problem to focusing on potential solutions. And by the way, they may be right. It might not work. So how do you prevent naysaying from happening? Establish ground rules such as benefits first. This means that you give the strength of an idea before identifying problems. Another ground rule that might help is take a stand. That is, rather than describing what won't work, describe what will. What do you do in the moment when faced with the naysayer? Just as you saw in the example, say with optimism, you may be right. How do we make it better? How do we fix it? After the moment, it may be helpful to meet with the naysayer privately to gain agreement to always state benefits first before stating problems. So far, we've talked about the dropout and the naysayer. Let's focus now on the whisperer. The whisperer holds side conversations during the meeting. Some of the common causes of the whisperer's behavior: the person did not hear or understand a prior comment and asked someone for clarification. The person heard the prior comment and makes a comment about it to someone. The person is having an unrelated discussion. You likely have seen the whisperer handled poorly. Does this sound familiar?
Okay, folks, we've just identified the steps in the current hiring process. What we're going to do next is, ladies, excuse me, is there something you're talking about that you'd like to share with all of us?
Well, excuse me. Where do you get off treating us like school children?
Well, if you didn't behave like children, I wouldn't treat you like children.
Wow, this is clearly not the way we want to handle the whisperer. So here's a more positive way to handle this situation.
Okay, folks, we've just identified the steps in the current hiring process. What I'd like to do next is, I'd like to remind everybody of the ground rules. If I can get us all to refer to the ground rules in the back of the room, it says we'll start and end on time, one conversation, and no sidebars. Does that work for everybody? I just want to remind everybody. Yes, we're all good with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Let's start again then.
So to prevent whispering, we recommend having a ground rule such as only one conversation at a time or no sidebars. But should whispering occur, we recommend the following course of action. You can adjust generally by saying, let's remember the ground rule that we want to have one conversation in the room so that we are respectful of the speaker and other listeners. Or privately, if possible, give the shh sign with one finger to your lips. And of course, after the moment, discuss the issue privately with the person to ensure that no additional problems exist. As mentioned earlier, videos of all the dysfunctions appear in your toolbox. But for this module, the last dysfunction we want to cover is the door slammer. The door slammer is the person who leaves the room in apparent disgust. Common causes of the door slammer's behavior might be the person has an issue unrelated to the meeting that needs immediate action. The person does not believe the meeting is worth investing additional time. The person is dissatisfied with the meeting content or meeting process. Recall that earlier we saw an example of a poorly handled door slammer. The meeting leader made mistakes in the moment, which we'll cover in a few minutes. But for now, let's focus on what happened after the door slammed.
Listen, if you're going to focus on the old process, then you can waste everyone else's time. I'm not going to waste my time.
Well, we're all probably fortunate that April found something better to do with her time. So what I'd like to do is go back and start defining the steps in the current hiring process. Let's get started by...
As you saw, the meeting leader kept going. Guess what everyone else was thinking about? The person who just walked out the door. It's almost always better to prevent dysfunction, but if you have a door slammer, you have to stop the meeting immediately and handle it. Let's pick up from the same spot.
Wow, April left rather abruptly. And so what I'd like to do real quickly, if you all will let me, is let's talk about why that happened. So why might April have just left the room, folks? Can somebody get me started with why?
Yeah, sure. I think she might have left the room because she just felt like it was a waste of her time. Maybe she felt like we've already gone through this content before and it doesn't make any sense to go through it again.
Great. So one of the reasons might be she felt like it was a waste of her time. Okay, so now that we have some of the reasons why it might have happened, what I'd like to talk about is what should we do about it? What would you like to do about it so that we can get back to the session or whatever the choices might be? What might we do in order to move on?
I think we should go over the old way of doing things very quickly and then just jump right into the new way, the new process.
Go over to the old way, and then what else was that, Neil, please?
And then jump into the new process of the way we're going to do things.
I got it. So go from the old and then go to the new.
Yes.
Great. All right, folks, now that we've talked about why April just did what she did and what we'd like to do about it, what I'd like to talk about next is what might we do differently so that we don't have something like this happening again in the future? What might we do differently to avoid this from happening in the future? Can somebody get me started with a suggestion?
I think we should be more open to change.
Okay, more open to change. Anybody else, please?
So by asking the three key questions, why do we think this happened? What are we going to do about it? What do we do differently to make sure the rest of us don't do the same thing? We have created the group story. And now we can take a break. By the way, can you imagine what would have happened if you take a break before creating the group story? Yes, that's right. People will likely create their own individual stories about why it happened, and this is typically not helpful. So how do you prevent the door slammer? You can establish ground rules such as everyone speaks about issues in the room, and we will discuss the undiscussable. We've already talked about what to do in the moment with the three questions. After the moment, you will want to follow up to ensure that the agreed upon actions are taken. You may want to consider meeting privately with the person yourself as well. So we've looked at 4 dysfunctions closely. Again, you will find in your toolbox information about all the dysfunctions listed. Before moving to the next section, please take the quiz that follows to confirm what you've learned.